Remember Jake, the guitarist?
Uh,
He was in my band for a second.
oh yeah, Jake, duh.
Yeah, he
We're on,
had
by
an
the way.
Adderall oh, okay. Ah, well, hello, Chris.
Hi there, Jeremy.
Welcome to our sixth. Which one is this? How
This
many?
is 7.
7. Wow, it's a regular thing.
I know, we've managed to make it pretty regular.
Yeah.
And I was, because I thought we were going to talk about other worlds, I've been working on a whole tone scale a little bit.
That's how your other world sound?
I didn't invent that. Everybody knows that the whole tone scale is the other world sound. This is a scientific fact.
Yes, it's true.
That is what I am playing right now. It's a weird scale. There's only 2 whole tone scales, as opposed to 12 for almost everything else. And it doesn't have, it's very ungrounded because the distance between all of the notes is the same. I was giving a quick a quick music theory lesson there.
Which is actually interesting because if you consider that a scale in which all tones are evenly spaced logically sounds like it might be more grounded than one with like a bunch of different intervals between the notes, but in that case,
you mean like
right,
logically that's how it seems like it should be?
Well, if you say what sounds more grounded, all the same spacing or all different spacing? Probably same, right?
Oh, I see what you mean. Philosophically, yes, but it turns out that that's not how it is.
No, it's true. It's not. I'm seeing the band Knower tonight. You know that band?
No.
I gotta check them out. They're amazing.
What are they called?
They're like prodigies. Knower, Knower. You'll like their production too on their videos. It's all like DIY. Yeah, they're crazy talented. So I'm seeing them at the Fox.
Cool. Yeah, I definitely like having this microphone, although I tend to pop on it. Pop, 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 pop.
Oh, you get a screen, huh?
Oh, yeah, I just didn't put it on.
Is that an earpiece or just a mic?
Oh, just a microphone. This is a Shure performance mic.
Oh, nice.
So in theory, it should be pretty good quality. It's probably the most expensive mic I've ever bought, but it's all because of the transmitter, the wirelessness. The microphone itself is like $150 bucks. Oh yeah, it's wireless, baby.
Oh yeah, Psychonaut.
Yeah.
What's the range?
I don't know, a lot more than I'll ever go, because I never go more than 20 or 30 feet.
That's true. You smoke salvia and you get confused and wander out of your house.
I smoked salvia about an hour ago.
Oh really? Yeah. I didn't. So a week later, my report is that it's very subjective. So I'm not going to say that I had lingering effects from the salvia, but I will say that the memory of the experience was so strong that I think there was times when I was interpreting my experience through that lens.
You mean through the afterglow?
Well, yeah, through the experience itself. Like, you know how, well, at least for me, when you smoke salvia, like your sense of touch can get sort of prickly, like how your skin feels can change.
Not really, to tell you the truth. But
no.
Go for it.
Well, I don't know, just that, and then I went snowshoeing and my hands got cold and I had the same sensation and my brain kind of brought back more memories of salvia through that experience. Like it linked them. And so it wasn't a flashback, but it...
you're telling me about that the other day.
Yeah, I did notice. Anyway, so that's interesting. I didn't smoke anymore. I had intended to, because I feel like I just did my introduction homework last time, but now I can actually go somewhere, which we could actually use out of the launch point. We're going to talk about different worlds, which I would say of...
Oh, wait, all right. We switched it to Adderall.
It was only one topic?
Well, no, you can talk whatever you want. Let's talk about mini worlds.
All right. Yeah, I was going to say, so I didn't do it anymore, but my intention was, after getting a lay of the map or the land from the last time, I was going to do it again and then, see if I could enter the world and really work with the world as opposed to working with my mind, trying to figure out which world to be in, which ultimately was important to learn. I had to get past that, but it kind of muddied the experience. But I didn't do more salvia, but I would say that of all the drugs I've taken, the salvia world is more of a world than other worlds. Other experiences. But then again, I have yet to do high-dose DMT, which I will do in the next couple of weeks. And that's a classic other world. 5-MeO DMT for sure.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah. High-dose, anything really. I've done high-dose acid, but I guess also it's worth asking before we kind of launch into that. Is this an interior world? Are your eyes closed? Are your eyes open? Like, what constitutes a world? Because I suppose there's certain worlds, a world of intuition or a world of sensory interpretation, but you might mean it differently.
Well, I think when people talk about that, I have never experienced anything like that. Well, I've had sort of like entity experiences, sort of. But it was your DMT experience, actually, that you talked about when you were a kid with Joel, that seemed between the two of us the most like somebody visiting, like really completely tapping out of this sensory experiencing and being replaced by another.
Yes. Oh, and
I don't do that.
Ketamine, I would say of all.
I'm sorry. I said DMT. I meant ketamine. Yeah.
Ketamine. DMT also. I think it was 5-MeO when I consider the effect. But yes, that was a world. It wasn't much of a world. It was just like white light. But it's not this world. But there weren't machine elves or anything. There was just white light. But ketamine for sure. That was more populated with archetypal. That's another good consideration. If someone's talking about an alternate world, there's archetype and then there's entity, where you might say that an archetype is like a platonic form.
Yeah.
And you can experience it, but it's different than an entity, which should be an expression of that. My analogy this week is about religious saviors. So I read this book. Anyway.
That's okay. You can tell me about that if you want.
I work at a Christian church, and so I'm just trying to figure out how to orient my story. The upshot is that the story of Jesus is a very common story, and everywhere from Greek gods to mystical leaders of religions, and certainly Christianity, and gods like in the Hindu pantheon. There's a lot of them that have a similar narrative about childhood endangerment and being a child of the divine and being crucified and resurrected and all this kind of thing. And so it occurred to me, like, hey, wait a second, that there's an archetype. That's the archetype, is like the collective of all the descriptions of this. You think of any archetype, well, what's the archetypal professor? It doesn't matter what professor it is. There's kind of like a stereotype. That's another word for it.
Yeah, and he's got patches on his elbows.
Yeah, right, exactly, and like round glasses.
Yeah, I suppose, and a bow tie.
Wears a microphone like you.
Yeah, I was thinking you make it sound like I'm pretending to be a professor. Maybe I have that a little bit.
The analogy has, hasn't escaped me. Anyway, but so there's archetypal other worlds, and then there's entities which feel like specific entities, like your ancestor, your grandmother's deceased spirit, or whatever it is. That's like a specific. I'm not sure that the division is very clear. I'm starting to derive this theory that, like, to use a specific example, I'm starting to consider the value of intelligent design theory.
I have gone through that phase myself.
And I'll say off the bat that I'm non-teleological about it. So number one, there's no dude. In fact, if it was anybody, it'd be a woman. And she's not in the fucking sky, because that is not make any sense at all. And she didn't do anything. So those three things are out, because it can't be anthropomorphic for it to be universal. It has to be universal. Quantum physics isn't like a tiny little man inside an atom. It's science, right? So my theory is that intelligent design is recognizing a pattern. Like they know something's there, and they're trying to define what it is. I think sometimes they define it incorrectly, and I don't think they know what the pattern is referring to, but I do think that they've recognizing a pattern. They're like, no way all this shit popped into existence out of nothing. No way DNA just assembled itself. No way you had no life and all of a sudden you have life. Like, yes, evolution at some stage, maybe after the first cell, but what happened between nothing and there? Like, we don't have an answer to that. There's no record that far back. So what kind of, it's like panpsychist. I'm a panpsychist creationist. Obviously there's organization. Yeah.
Who's not?
Same with God.
Duh.
Like, there's some organization, but what that organization refers to is impossible to say. All you can do is see the effect of the organization and then infer that there is some. That's about as far as I go. Yeah. And if it was anybody, it'd be a black woman, not a white man. So let's just make that extremely clear right now.
Right. Well, we know how you feel about your black women goddesses.
Well, black people are the superior race. So I mean, they were first. So we're just pale versions. Anyway, so alternate worlds. That's kind of my thought, is that, like physical senses, you're experiencing something, but the more literal you interpret it, you have a certain kind of experience, and then the more you interpret it as an archetype or just an energy or whatever you call it, then you have a different kind of experience. And I think how one's brain works really determines the kind of world and how immersive it is. Chris, I know both you and I tend towards it being not very concrete. But some people really have they get abducted by aliens and they can see what the walls look like. But I just don't have that. Never really was interested. I saw a ghost a couple times and I was like, you know what? I don't need that. That's not my jam.
Oh, you saw a ghost once?
Yeah, I did. I really had a ghost experience once, maybe more than once, but your haunted farmhouse. I didn't see a ghost, but I knew there was something weird going on.
Oh my! Your ghost was at my house.
No, that was when I was a kid.
Okay.
But
well, what's interesting is you've had some dramatic paranormal experiences. Actually, we should talk about that sometime.
Let's see, like what?
You have the story of your college girlfriend, I think, that was teaching you some divination. I mean, I've studied divination too, but it was always
that's a good example, actually.
Not very paranormal, let's say.
Divination. She wasn't my girlfriend. She was a roommate, but me being me, I just didn't have a lot of people to talk to about things I was interested in. She had bipolar disorder. And so her psyche had been terribly fractured and then put back together.
Yeah, I remember you saying that she had some. Well, I used to work with psychics a lot. I did psychic readings myself. I, in a way, never took my own work very seriously. It was just sort of a gig for me. But what I found is that a lot of the best psychics had a lot of trauma in their background. Specifically, a lot of them seem to have childhood sexual abuse in their background.
Yeah, that's not surprising. Or temporal lobe epilepsy, or somehow, I don't know, it's weird. Somehow the human psyche needs to be destabilized in order to kind of do anything, grow, have any kind of non-ordinary experience. Obviously, psychedelics exist purely to destabilize the mind in certain ways. I always had this theory, or I don't know what you call it, but nobody's going to make extra work for themselves, right? So you're never going to go to a therapist to work on your childhood issues if you don't have childhood issues. There's no reason. But if you do have childhood issues and you go to a therapist and you grow, then in a way you're in a better position than someone who never went at all. Because even though you were traumatized, now you have all these skills, and you can actually use those skills to build new skills, if that makes sense, right? It's not, tools aren't just to fix how you were. Now you have a tool of mindfulness.
Oh, yeah, I think you're arguing that even though the issues that got you into to the therapist suck, they were difficult, but if you successfully learn those skills, they are actually things that are going to make you a better human being, more powerful.
Yeah, I mean, if everybody gets $1 million when they turn 18, who's going to go to college and get a job? I mean, some people, but you don't have to, so why would you? And if you don't, you're not going to become who you could be. So it takes I think for humans to grow or change, we have to be harmed or stressed. Something has to be wrong. Otherwise, there's no reason to attempt to grow. If you don't want to learn anything, then why would you read a book? Anyway, I think these are the worlds we're talking about in psychedelics. And I don't know, I would consider making the argument that the difference between an archetypal and a literal experience on psychedelics, probably there's a lot of factors. If you're still relating to your mind in a mechanical way. If you haven't yet understood the workings of the mind, then you're going to kind of have to work with the mind based on what it generates, right? But if you understand the workings of the mind, you don't have to interact with the images it gives you. You can work with the image generating capacity of the mind. You can go like one step back, right? It's like, learning about the machine that makes tools. You don't have to use the tools, or, you can, because you know about the machine that's making them, or the television. It's not the content, it's the thing making it. Anyway, so I think all this informs our consideration of what's a world.
Oh, that's where we're going, is what's the world. Oh, by the way, we've had more viewers than usual today. Our buddy Hayes is here. I think he's seen all of our shows.
Oh, what's up, Hayes? Yeah, good. Are we getting comments? I mean, can we see comments? Like,
yes, everything's going really well today. I even remember to turn on your audio today.
Oh, that's great.
Hey, somebody, Hayes actually mentioned this teacher. Have you ever heard? I don't know how to say it. Chimetria? Starts with a K, a KY.
Okay. No, Chimetria.
No, me neither. He says he's African, I think.
Okay. Hey, I do want to say, Hayes, last time, I believe it was you, or 2 times ago, that asked how to work with your mind, how to avoid a bad trip, basically. You recall that, Chris?
Yeah.
Anyway,
I don't remember if it was him, but we have it's an important subject.
I think somebody did. Anyway, I ended up saying a lot about that. I believe it was 2 weeks ago. So I think there's a lot of good information in there if anybody's curious about different methods of, the idea of a bad trip, I think, is getting outmoded as people get educated. But basically, how to work with your mind and its experience, whether it feels good or not, would be. So, all of that, I think I was kind of setting up the discussion of alternate worlds, because I did kind of needed to define, what is a world in the first place?
Well, I'll tell you about the video I made on this topic.
Okay.
I was really happy with it, actually. I'm really happy with where I'm at artistically right now.
Oh, nice.
I was in the bath, and
You literally filmed in the bathtub?
Fuck yeah, man.
You're the real deal.
Yep. I've done it before. Yeah. Oh, that's a great shot, actually. You're not allowed to move.
Stretching my back.
Oh, it's a great shot. Oh, what I was saying is, I might have mentioned this before, but this doesn't have anything to do with alternate worlds, but maybe we'll get back to it. Is that, wait, I'm sorry, it does have to do. I almost forgot. It's 2 subjects, right? It's the way I got into it was saying that people travel to other worlds when they're on Salvia, and I didn't even know this until I started doing more research into meeting other people, and I got on this subreddit, and I've met tons of people over this channel, and I've looked at other Salvia oriented YouTube channels, although there's not really very many. Actually, I don't really know of any active Salvia channels right now, other than mine, to tell you the truth. But anyway,
you mean you hadn't heard that people go to a specific kind of world?
Yeah, I always thought the Salvia was very low on the visual hallucination side, and only gave you like patterns. And for me, part of it is I've got one guy who keeps on asking me. It's funny. On my channel, he's asked several times about the visuals that I have, and it's for me. By the time, if I'm high enough to have hallucinations, I'm so high that what I see has no significance anyway. So it's really hard to answer. But some people have very visual, almost like datura kinds of experiences on salvia, and I don't. I will see patterns and stuff, but anyway, what I was explaining is that where I go is I do have a sense of traveling, of sort of going somewhere, but there is no content. It's like falling from reality and into this like void where there are no interpretations, but I still see everything. My perceptions don't disappear. I mean, I'm closing my eyes usually, but so I don't see anything because my eyes are closed. But for me, the traveling quality is falling away from my interpretation of my, this sounds so much like Cloudless Rain right now. It's all about interpretation. It's all about epistemology. It's not that I don't perceive other things, but I do have a traveling quality because I'm falling away from reality. So into sort of this Buddhist kind of void where there's no even ego.
Are you harmonizing your voice?
No, not right now. I can if you want.
Well, no, I'm hearing
da, 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 da.
It was there harmonized?
Anyway. Actually, it doesn't sound harmonized.
That's stronger.
Oh, well, this should not sound harmonized, I don't think.
It is. I am hearing it. That's why I asked.
Right now, really?
It's subtle and it's very high register.
Well, we'll have to. I haven't recorded with this microphone, so it might be a weird quality of the microphone, or I don't hear it, but it's hard for me to hear.
I liked how you could harmonize your voice.
Here you go. I can definitely do it like this. I don't even hear it like that though. Duh. There it is. Yep. Yeah. Now I can definitely hear the harmonization. Yep.
That's definitely good production for drug videos. Anyway, okay. As you were saying.
Drug videos need harmony. Drug videos need harmony. Drug videos need harmony. Drug videos need harmony.
Definitely. That's what everything sounds like on drugs. Okay, so you're going somewhere because you're moving away from reality.
Yeah, I mean, so that is the best analogy to space. I'm moving away from, and I've also thought about this, that even that sounds dramatic. Like I'm losing my sense of reality, which, sounds like a pretty big deal and dramatic, but I've gotten so used to it now. I always say this, I can always pop out. All I have to do is raise my eye, open my eyes. So it's almost like there's two realities going on at once. Once is still very grounded and completely knows what I'm doing and is completely comfortable and not even feeling any, well, maybe a tinge of fear, but not very much. More and more, there's like no fear with salvia at all for me. I feel like I'm going to the next level for me in my salvia development, where it started out just weird. When you introduced it to me in the left channel 20 years ago, it was just weird and exciting because it's a new psychedelic. Then I had some bad trips and was quite intimidated by it. And there is still a little bit of intimidation with salvia because the possibility for a bad experience, a difficult experience, is always there. And they happen to me every once in a while, and I can talk about that. But then starting after my ayahuasca experience about 15 years ago or 12 years ago, I did ayahuasca ceremonially. And it reminded me a lot of salvia. I don't know why, because they're not chemically or neurologically similar at all. But at the time, it reminded me a lot of salvia. I think it's because I was experiencing a lot of dissociation, I guess. And then and this taught me, the ayahuasca taught me a lesson about salvia. And so I went back home and started getting into salvia, only I did it very religiously. I did it really ceremoniously, with like a ceremony kind of an attitude. And I did that for a long time. And now I feel like I'm transitioning, well, obviously into being a teacher, but also it's just weird how comfortable I am with it. And that's new. Like, I don't even have to treat it as like a high and mighty sacrament anymore. I can practically just smoke it like tobacco because I just fall into the space. It's still meditation. I close my eyes, but like there's no intimidation factor at all anymore. It's like I'm coming home. It's completely. I have to be careful, just like when I enter my home. I don't know. There are risks at home, but like the intimidation factor is like zero now. It's kind of weird. It's a new thing, and I want to get into some higher doses because low doses are very tame now. They're not boring, but they're sort of tame.
No, I'm the high dose guy. You can't do that.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, you've got that covered.
I got that covered. We'll do it together. Actually, that could be fun. When you're saying that, I had this thought of the willingness to suffer. Now, whether that's physical or psychological, and I'm not sure the brain knows which is which. It just knows something is wrong or abnormal. And then it gets scared, and then it wonders how abnormal it is, and then it gets more scared, and then you're trying to protect yourself, and then, you're tripping out, or you're running away, or, so this could be mind or body. But it occurred to me that part of surrendering, if you know you're safe, and so you're not actually... And so your mind already knows that you know the drug's safe, it's not going to hurt you, you're in a safe place, everything's good. Then to learn how to be okay with, I'm using the word suffering, you could say discomfort or unknown or risk or whatever, the ability to allow that to happen to you seems to be a lot of the stuff.
You're saying that the ability to allow yourself to have these experiences is important?
Well, not just these experiences, but allowing yourself to suffer, right? I mean, it's like anything. If you're mad about something or sad, let's say sad, because especially for men, that's harder. If you're sad about something, and really allowing yourself to experience that, or, life's harder. I don't know, as opposed to trying to override, because you can't override on psychedelics, and sometimes they do things to you, especially in the beginning, or if you're new, that feel like strange and wrong in contrast to what you ordinarily experience. So there's a kind of a tinge of suffering might not be the right word, but I chose that word to kind of tie together different elements. If you allow life to happen, good or bad, then you have an easier time navigating your experience, because you don't have to be in control. You don't have to always be on the winning team. Your ego is like, someone gave me a bunch of shit and I don't deserve it, but I'm okay, or I feel like a schmuck. And you don't have to try to always feel better. Basically, I'm kind of leaning into potentially our next topic, but I don't want to shift topics to say that whatever experience you're having is your experience. And that's just a truism. That's all you got is your experience. But whether it's a good experience or a bad experience, that's another time to be to allow yourself to really receive the experience you're having. Don't try to repeat the good ones, and don't try to resist the bad ones. Just take it in, and then you realize there's something deeper than both of those, and that's the experience itself, or the self that is experiencing, right? There's a lower level. So just when you, and I don't think this necessarily applies to you, Chris, but when you said there was no longer fear, the first thing that occurred to me is, well, maybe part of you has said, you know what, this feels weird, but I know it's okay. And now that I know it's okay, obviously you're very practiced. So I'm using this in a bigger, more widely applicable idea. But,
sure.
you have it. Now you know you're okay and this experience is okay. You stop really trying to wrestle with the experience itself, and then you go underneath. And what you find underneath anything is serenity, peace, acceptance, love, unity, compassion, right? These are the things that you're left with when you stop wrestling with the quality of your experience. And I think that's one of the teachings of these psychedelics. It's also the teaching of life. Bad things happen, and sometimes it's just circumstantial and doesn't mean anything, but things do happen that are really upsetting. Anger's different. I'm specifically talking about fear or sadness. Those are harder, right? When we're out of control and there's an experience happening to us, it feels like it's happening to us, so we don't have power. So you're like, well, who's doing it to me? What's their intention? Is this drug safe? How much did I take? As long as you know that's all okay, then you're like, you know what? This experience is okay. That's why there's no bad trip. There's just a trip. That doesn't even mean that a bad trip teaches you something. It's a lower level. It just means that if you can relax around your experience, instead of being caught up in the experience, you now start to experience your own state of relaxation. And I think that's a world. And I don't think there's a hierarchy. I think people are different. But to me, if you're having a very realistic experience, either A, you're just an awakened person and that's really happening and aliens exist and you're just having that experience. And then people like us just don't, because we're not dumb. Wired that way. What?
Because we're dumb.
Because we're dumb. Or, and I don't know, maybe they're both true or neither are true, maybe they're the same thing, or you have a real experience, but then you recognize that it's just an experience, and then you recognize that there's a bigger framework, right? Where is the experience coming from? Who's the person having the experience? These kind of things, which that's always been my goal in spirituality and mysticism and psychedelics. I always want to get to understanding who's having the experience. But I think accepting the experience is part of it. Otherwise, you wrestle with it and it becomes amazing or terrible or really meaningful. And that stuff's all great. But the other way is, it's the more intense your experience, all it does is put more pressure on you to just be with the self having the experience. And that's when you kind of come into these non-dual states and self-awareness, whatever terms we want to use. But I do think that discomfort is part of that. If everything feels awesome, you're just going to go with your experience because it's awesome. But if your experience is uncomfortable, the gift of surrendering is that you fall into yourself more deeply. And that's a real learning, I think, on these chemicals. Anyway, so that's what I'm not sure you can tell us your experience, but somehow that came up for me when you said there's like no more fear anymore, and now you're just falling in. Like you can go
maybe
deeper,
that's a bad thing. It's like I'm hitting the bottom.
Hey, smoke more.
Just smoke more, yeah, and the bottom goes down, so don't worry.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see,
if
what I was going to say as far as this
not.
discomfort thing that you're talking about is the importance of the gift of having some discomfort in your life. Like that is a theme that you've been talking about, right?
Yeah.
I've always felt that this was I've always been attracted to dissonance and ugly sounds in music. Because, for a very similar reason, ugly sounds in music hold a lesson to me because they're not actually dangerous. People hate these sounds. And they have negative reactions to ugly sounding sounds in music. And most people, not very sophisticated music fans, which is most people, they hear these nasty sounds and they immediately think this music is bad. That's why experimental jazz or experimental classical music or even advanced like sounds in prog rock don't sell lots of records. But I've always been attracted to those sounds because I feel like they have a lesson to teach, and that is the problem isn't in the sound, the problem is in you. You are judging, because there isn't anything, let me pull this out for a second. There isn't anything inherently like bad or dangerous or suboptimal about sounds like this. There isn't anything inherently not beautiful about that sound.
I'm not hearing your keyboard, but maybe that's just my feed.
Oh, really? Well, then I will just imagine that I'm playing like harsh noise. Just imagine that, okay? Imagine a whole bunch of very noisy music. But I've always been fascinated by why do people not like that, and then what happens when you learn to like that, and it's sort of this orgasmic like a healing, like it's like you learn to like ugly music, you are learning how to love the world.
It almost sounds,
Well, it's similar to what you were saying, that like every time that if something is actually dangerous, then it's actually dangerous, right? If something is actually going to hurt you or hurt the people around you or something like that, well, then that is an actual threat. But so many of the things that we have resistance against in our lives aren't threats at all, like weird music. And people, especially with music, more so than visual art, like they hear those crazy sounds and they meet it fucking like they are gone. I've been there. I've seen people leave my shows.
What percentage would you say?
Not that.
Just
well,
kidding.
Out of the 3 people, one of them left.
Exactly.
But if it gets into psychedelics, it gets into spirituality. Spiritual music oftentimes has challenging sounds in it. But then you've got like new age music. Now I'm getting into new age music these days, but I've always felt that there is actually something immature about if your spiritual music has to be like really touchy feeling, that says something about your spirit.
Yes.
Right? If your spiritual development or your psychology was strong enough to allow for some challenges in this world, which is where ultimately you should be, well, then you can listen to challenging music and find the beauty that is actually there.
That's a better word than suffering or whatever I said. Challenge.
And I can speak from experience that when you go from not understanding to the music, shit, I played too much, and now my computer crashed. My music program crashed.
I don't think it was working anyway.
It is definitely working. I can tell. I don't understand why
you can hear it.
Because I can see the level hitting the.
Oh, okay. Cool. That's fine.
Well, it's not.
I don't
now
like those sounds
crashed.
anyway, so it makes me uncomfortable. That was a joke. Well, while you're doing that, so what do you say? Challenge. Yes, you said that where you should be is your psyche is in a place where being challenged, you're able to be challenged. And so kind of my way of seeing that is that whatever experience you're having is the experience you're creating inside yourself. You can blame it on anything you want. You can say, this music sucks, I'm annoyed now, or I'm freaked out. But you always also have to consider the fact that you said, I'm freaked out, and that's the reason. But if you learn to accept it or love it, then guess what you have? You have a loving experience in yourself, and that's the way you're relating to yourself. You know?
Yeah. Right. And I think it's important, again, in my own personal journey, is a transition from, and I think for me at least, when I think about spirituality, or if I'm in a position of teaching about spirituality, like I guess I kind of am right now, one of the big changes is going from a victim mentality to a giver mentality, emotionally and spiritually. That doesn't mean if you need a healing, you need a healing. But ultimately, if you're in I need to shield from the negative energies, or I really need God's love. Well, then that is when I say it's a victim mentality, I don't mean that that's bad and that you're stupid and you should just turn that off. I mean that that's where you're at. And then once you're beyond, I don't know, the more enlightened, I guess. I don't know what word to use, but like, if you can get to the point where you're not thinking about receiving love from God, instead you are God and you're giving love, that's when the healing has happened.
Mm.
Or like with music, or with art. If you're going, if you're going to the show and you're like, oh, I really need them to play, I was trying to think of a funny song you always say. What's the dumbest song you always play?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, Brick House.
Brick House. Okay. I really need them to play Brick House, and if they don't play Brick House, then I'm gonna not have a good time at this wedding. Well, the problem is you. Okay, there's not the band is okay, and the Brick House is okay, and the other show songs are okay, but if there is a problem, you're the one who has these expectations for what the world needs to be, and rather than being the source of acceptance and love and appreciation for the world that's around you.
So basically you're saying if you want to hear Brick House, you should play it yourself. Is that what you're saying?
It's something like that. Damn it. I keep on hitting the microphone too hard. I should get a wind a wind zapper breaker.
Yeah, no, that's it. And that's applicable to your experience in psychedelics, life. Basically, you yourself is what's left after you take away everything. So whatever experience you're having, however you're chalking it up in your mind, is still one that you're creating. And it's a complex system. But I guess, Chris, if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is if you can get down to the mechanics of how that experience is arising, then you can start taking on these ideas of being God, or giving love instead of needing it, or trying to accept something that the rest of your brain is rejecting, or, accepting an experience even though it's uncomfortable. But once you get used to it, then you're kind of, once you start reacting. Yeah, totally.
That's why that's why like spa spirituality is not, good, basically.
Yeah, as long as I'm at a spa, I'm enlightened.
Yeah, exactly.
As long as I'm getting massaged, then I'm enlightened.
That's funny. That doesn't automatically fit. Usually these things, you just pop them on. Whoa, what happened? Oh, that's cool. I see. I was like, I didn't put that filter on. Oh, that's you putting that filter on.
This is this is an analog filter.
Yeah, that is actually pretty nice. It's bright red, like really pink, And it looks nice because my thing is mostly black and white.
I really like this amber. I like amber sunglasses.
Really?
And the amber tint that Zenny sells is like the perfect tint for me.
Is that Zenny?
It's Zenny. These have held up well. It's like $30. I've taken care of them.
Fucking Zenny is the answer. Salvia.
Yeah, Zenny.
Gospel music, harsh noise, and Zenny for your and Zenny.
Since we're kind of, I mean, I'm tracking a larger fabric of topics, and I feel like we're kind of informing all of them. But I wanted to add another one since you said, and I thought this was actually a good. We don't have to be a segue. We'll just add in something, right? So you mentioned that if you're an actual, what was the word you used? If you're, if there's an actual problem, what did you say? Anyway, if you're hurting people around you or you're in trouble, that's kind of what, well, okay. I texted you during the week and you said, let's talk about it at the call. And what I was saying is that you tend to be a staunch idealist, right? Is that the word? Phenomenologist? What's your word? Oh, you don't have to categorize yourself. But your experience is what you have. Your experience is your experience.
Your experience, here, why don't you go ahead and talk, and then I'll tell you that you're wrong.
All right. No. I'm agreeing with you. That's always been
okay.
Or you can make your statement, because I don't want to say it for you, because basically all you have is your experience. So whatever it is, mind, body, reality, inside, outside, that's your experience. You can't say something's not real, or you can't say that something's not your experience as it is. But then I have always been trying to say yes, but then those experiences mean different things. And you're the one that just said, like if you're actually in danger, then that's, worth considering. Right? You just said that about your last point, that, you're, if you're actually in danger, that's one thing. But if it's just harsh noise, then you're not in danger and learning to love. It's like a growth experience.
Right.
So I've always been for 20 years. No, I've always been trying to say, okay, yeah, philosophically experience is experience, but there are differences and you have to attribute different value and meaning to them because experiences mean something. It's not just sensory data. I mean, even if it is, so a sword, a knife going through your arm is sensory data, but it does have a different value than harsh noise, right? If a knife goes through your arm, that's a different kind. I'm trying to say it the most neutrally I could, but that carries a different value. What's the word? Value, attribution, I guess, than harsh noise.
Well, the main point that I'm always trying to make, as far as like realism, I don't actually think of myself as an idealist. I used to. But that our idea, when I say it's not that the like real, and by real I mean external world. Obviously, your experience is happening, right? That shouldn't be controversial. Experience is happening. The question is anything other than experience happening? That's where we get it. That's where epistemology meets, or phenomenology meets metaphysics. Can I take my experience and say something without a doubt like that is happening outside of my experience? And that's what we think of as the real world usually. And the point I'm always trying to make is that even if the external world does exist, the only reason you believe that the external world exists is because you have interpreted your experiences and created the notion of the external world.
Oh, sure. And I would say, that's why if you sit down and close your eyes and really, really focus on the worst memory that you have, your heart rate and blood pressure are going to go up, and you're going to feel anxious, and you're going to have a real emotional experience, perhaps not as strongly as the one you had in the real world, quote unquote, but your brain doesn't totally know the difference between external and internal. To your point, it's just experience. Right? But that's a proof of that if you imagine something, you will emotionally respond as if it's partially real.
Well, all those things happen.
Like if you imagine jumping off a cliff, part of you is going to respond, but nothing's happening. It's in your head. I'm building on your point, and I agree. Internal, external. In fact, I don't even think that's a good dichotomy. I think maybe part of the problem is that's a stupid model. There might be a model, but that's an impoverished model, inside and outside. It's almost better to talk about density of energy, right?
What do you mean?
Well, experience, it's not like every experience is the same thing, right? You have different experiences: visual, auditory, tactile. But everything is vibrating. I think that also should be non-controversial. So if you touch a tree, that experience has a different density, and I'm not saying it's more or less real, because I'm just saying that there's than sound, right? Like what light is, what is it, 400 to 200 to 900 nanometers or something, I don't remember. And sound is a lot bigger than that, right? It starts at 20 hertz, whereas light is like way higher. Right. So we're saying that now instead of experience, we can talk about amplitude and frequency.
Well, see, what I would say is it doesn't matter what you're talking about. You're always talking about experience. There is no other category. That's the point I'm always trying to make.
Well,
because and that is not even to say that the whatever isn't real, whatever it is you're talking. I'm not saying that amplitudes and things aren't real. I'm not saying that turtles aren't real, or that your wife isn't real. I'm saying that what those things ultimately are experiences that you're having.
Right. I guess I'm unclear why we need to stress that point. So what you're saying is weather exists. Doesn't matter what kind of weather it is. It's all cold weather. Right? Clothes. It doesn't matter what you're wearing. It's all clothes. By definition that you're wearing them.
Well, I think that the point, it might not seem significant to you because, well, I don't know. I've always found your position on this a little confusing for me and also fascinating.
Happy to oblige.
Like when we used to talk about Donald Hoffman, and you were like, yeah, it's interesting, but it's completely useless. And I didn't even know what to say because I didn't understand your critique.
I already take for granted that the whole notion of reality is quite subjective.
I think that's what it might be, is that I talk about these things, I'm like, oh my God, I just had this insight, and you're like, duh.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas you are way more interested in things like neural correlates, or like this is located in your body here, and this other thing is located in your body there, and I'm like, dude, this is boring.
Well, then we'll just get to this. My only question then is if you're purely in that perspective, right? If you're, let's say you've meditated, so your entire consciousness is suffused with the truth that experience is experience, and and it's just kind of a self-referencing loop. There's nowhere else to look.
Yeah.
Now, and I understand that as a point of philosophy, which does create perception, that's an effective thing. Like, if you start meditating on the concept, you're going to interpret the world differently. Right? It's not just an idea. It creates an experience.
All right. You mean that when you are interpreting the world this way philosophically, it ends up affecting your experience? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Totally.
Okay. Now, and I don't know if you find this contradictory or not, but then my next question is, does that mean that all experience has the same attribution of value? Could you get yourself to a place where you're so, kind of like we've been talking, right? It doesn't matter what you're experiencing, harsh noise or spa music, you can get to a place where you can receive it in the same way, that you don't resist, and you can kind of like be free in that, right?
Sorry, could you say that again? I was chatting with somebody.
Yeah. Through that philosophy, you can get to a place where, let's say, you find freedom in the fact that you can now really accept harsh noise because you recognize that experience is experience, and you can stop resisting, and you can kind of like sink into the experience, and there's a kind of freedom or evolution in there.
Yep, that's a good way to put it.
But how now? What's the framework or the hierarchy where you could do that, but there's other things analogously that you couldn't do? Like if you had your choice to sit in a hot tub or a freezing river, could you actually do both and have the same experience, or would you be willing to? Or to take the analogy even further, if there's something that's, affecting your body in a more physical way, then what do you do? Then where does that go? Right? If you're going to chop off a thumb, 4 fingers or 5 fingers philosophically is the same. And while it affects how you interact with the world, that also is just your experience. So at what point I guess my question is, at what point do you have to accept that there's another frame of reference that is directing your perspective or your choices more strongly than realism, or whatever term you used before? At what point, and what accounts for that? Is it the density of the thing? Sound? Fine, not going to hurt you. A knife? It will.
Are you saying why? So we put judgments like this is good and this other thing is bad. Are you asking like where that comes from?
No. I'm taking your stance, and I'm in agreement with you on that anyway. I'm just saying that there's a context in which you're speaking philosophically. And that context is, kind of being silly, but I kind of mean this. The context is we're talking in a language, we're thinking of ideas philosophically, and those ideas are affecting us. That's the container, right?
Yeah.
We can't do that if we're doing other shit and can't focus on having the conversation. We can't do that. So it's like a meditation. But I'm saying, as true as that is, where does that go when you're encountering something that fits the model, such as I could jump into a swimming pool or a tub of lava? Are you saying that you're taking, and that's not even a good one, because I think what you're going to say is, well, you just make a choice and that's your experience. But what I'm trying to get at is, there's a moment when an experience is, and I clearly keep going on and on, so I'm doing a poor job of this, but there's a moment in which your experience is your experience, but it has another layer to it. It's not just all the same, right? Harsh noise, harsh noise, or Bon Jovi, you could say it's the same. It's just sound. It's not going to really do anything to you, and it's your experience. But can you apply that to something where the effect is more physical? Are you going to say that it doesn't matter whether you have one or two arms because it's just experience? Or is that a goal to get there, or what's the, because that to me seems like there's another frame of reference.
I'm not against making those distinctions, and I'm not against saying that if you like Bon Jovi more than harsh noise, I'm not against saying, liking Bon Jovi.
No, that wasn't it.
Well, I mean, or the other one, like the lava versus the lake.
Yeah.
As far as how this goes into, the theory of perception and stuff, it's the only distinction I'm making, and I never know quite, whatever. It's just the context for that whole drama is your experience. That's my point. Maybe this is because when I grew up, I was more embedded in physicalism. And so coming to the conclusion that experience is the ultimate context for everything was a big deal for me.
I see. Right. So no matter what you say, you can always say, well, that's your experience, no matter what it is, because it's true.
And if I experience, jumping into lava being bad, there's nothing wrong with that experience, but it's an experience.
I guess then when I'm asking,
and if I didn't experience it, it would be irrelevant to me because I didn't even experience it.
Okay, well, here's my question. How do you apply that philosophy? The philosophy is taking in information and explaining it. If you apply your philosophy, if you direct it toward the source of experience, then what happens? Are you making a choice? And if you are, based on what?
What do you mean by the source of experience?
Well, let's say literally, the sound is coming from a speaker, right? In the philosophical frame, you're kind of working with your subjective experience of the sound and realizing it's your experience, and it's just sound, so we don't need to resist it. It's a very, I don't even want to use internal, external. It's a very directly somatic, self-oriented process. When you say your experience, there's a you experiencing, right?
Right.
Yeah, but the sound is coming from a speaker.
Yeah, but so the reason I know about the speaker is because it's in my experience too.
No, I know. Nowhere am I trying to say that something's more real than another, or that something is outside your experience. That's not, I'm just saying, do you use that philosophy in real world navigation? Or is it more like, it's like you could say that with God. I really believe in God, but when it comes down to it, I really believe in my own hard work. I don't actually pray or think that God's doing anything, right? So to me, and this is maybe, kind of my holistic thing because of how I grew up. I'm like, well, if your model doesn't work both ways, then it's not really, it's an explanatory model, but it's limited because you can't apply, it doesn't direct your actions. And if it doesn't direct your actions, then you are actually saying there's another world outside your experience. There's a duality arises. So I guess I'm saying, can that model direct your experience, or is it just interpretive?
Let me think about that.
Yeah.
See, I think that there's sort of I almost think of it as a third, or like the idea of saying, well, this theory is explanatory, and this is a big thing in science, natural science, is there really any point to learning unless it builds a technology?
Oh, okay.
To me, what the theories that we're talking about don't matter. This really applies to any kind of abstract theory about the world or about your life. Is let's say hypothetically that I grew up believing that my mom didn't love me.
Yeah.
Then I hang out with my mom maybe, and then my mom and I go and eat mushrooms together. This is an extremely hypothetical situation for me, by the way. My mom and I ended up going and eating mushrooms together, and then I realized, no, I had interpreted the situation wrong my whole life. It's just that she was really literally busy putting food on the table and didn't have time for me, and so actually she did love me that whole time. Now, which category does this go into? Is this practical information that's going to affect my life? Or is this sort of meaningless, interesting data? I would like to contend it's not. It's both. It's not obviously going to change my behavior, right? The fact that it turns out my mom loved me this whole time, it's not going to affect very much what groceries I buy or what microphone I buy. But is it just pointless data? I don't think that's fair. I think that your understanding of the world is really important for your life, even if it's not affecting your behavior.
I agree. Yeah, just taking your example of face value and the science versus technology, I agree. There's value. What was restate your final conclusion? It's not just data.
My conclusion is that I feel like, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like what you're implying, and we've been talking about this for a long time, it always came up when we talked about Don Hoffman, was this metaphysics is fascinating. But what's the point? Because it's not going to affect the groceries that I buy.
Oh, okay. So my point is the only point I'm making is I understand that philosophy is a certain context of life, right? It's language and thinking and all these things. It's not playing basketball. They're not the same thing. So I'm not saying that what's the point of it, because I do know the point. In fact, my most impactful experience sometimes are at the level of philosophy and perspective. I'm only saying if you can't apply it physically, and again, I don't know what that means, because if there's no inside and outside, what's this other realm that we can't apply it to? And if we can't apply it, what does that say about reality? Are there two realities? You know what I mean? I'm not saying that there's lack of value in that. I'm just saying, what do we do about the part of reality where it doesn't apply, and what does that say about reality itself? Like, is it different? Is it outside versus inside? Is it, somehow when you go to the store, now everything's physical, but when you go home and meditate, it's actually not? Now I feel like we're in a paradox.
I don't know what to do with you.
Well, I guess my question is, well, let's use science. If you learn about the world, but it doesn't turn into a technology, then great. It does affect our actions. And maybe the answer lies in the subtlety, which to me is not subtle at all. If you think your mom never loved you, chances are you're going to grow up more angry and less well-adjusted than somebody who thought or felt his mother loved him. Because we're vulnerable organisms, and that's one of our main sources of sense of safety, protection, social connectivity. And if you feel alone all the time, then it does have repercussions, because we have to create a sense of that by ourselves instead of it happening between us and another person. And I would argue that if you take mushrooms and you're like, oh my God, you loved me this whole time, there would be this great relaxation. Defenses would go down. You would feel like the world's a safer place. You would be kinder to people. You would probably be more generous. You might earn money easier because you're less freaked out about it. It would affect literally everything, potentially.
Well, I would say the same thing for metaphysics, though, is that if you believe in God, in theory, and if you really believe in God, that should affect your life in a pretty real way.
Yeah.
So, too, do you see yourself as a tiny speck of a meaningless dust in an infinite multiverse, or do you see you as being at one with a conscious field in which the world arises?
Yeah, it's a different impact, right?
Yeah, and it might affect the food that you eat, it might affect your actions, but ultimately it's actually more important than your actions, because it is affecting the world that you believe that you live in is essentially the world that you live in, even if your beliefs are wrong. So it really affects your moment to moment life.
Okay, now let me propose this. Let me just try to answer my own question, because I've worked with these ideas a long time, and they're part of my meditation system. But if I tell myself everything I'm experiencing is my experience, and I'm going to cease to make a hierarchy of internal and external, or better or worse, or which I think salvia is a lot of psychedelics do this, right? So basically, sometimes you're having an experience that's so lacking in structure, it's hard to interpret, and it's just this mass of colors and patterns and sounds all mushed together, right? That's like a psychedelic experience, which to me would be an expression of the philosophy that all you have is your experience. Now, that's not to say that philosophy means you don't have any hierarchy at all, because you could say that if you're being Donald Trump, that's just your experience. So I guess I don't know. It's such a circular thing that no matter what you say, you just say that's your experience. I guess what I was getting to is how I would apply that is that and I see you do this too, is I would recognize, first of all, I would do away with good and bad. Now, my physical body and my brainstem have their own reality. So if I try to hold my hand in a flame, in most cases, I'm going to jerk my hand back pretty fast. And I can't really control that. And I don't think this is what you're saying, but to me, to say that whatever you're experiencing is just experience is to say that in some way, all experience is neutral and is in a way the same as any other experience because it's the same word.
I think that might be the crux of the issue, is that I don't feel like that is an implication of what I'm saying.
Oh. So then what happens when you start treating things differently than other things? It's just part of your experience.
Yeah. And actually, it's sort of a different topic. Than remember when we were talking about the harsh noise thing, and where it was saying, oh, it's so cool to get to the point where there's things that you used to not like and now you do like them because you realize that it was your own subjectivity that was making those distinctions. That's important too, but it's not quite the same topic for me. When I say that everything, that all phenomena are just a modulation of consciousness, I don't mean that to undermine avoiding the tiger.
See. You're saying that all subjectivity exists. It's just that if it's all modulation and consciousness, and you're just saying the difference between body and mind isn't really a difference at all.
No, what we call the mind what we call the body is a interpretation of some experiences that I'm having. So when I'm talking to you, Jeremy, actually I was going to say every time I talk to you, I see your body, but that's not true. Often we talk on the phone and I don't see your body. And yet I've got this idea that there is a physical body that correlates with the voice that I hear, right? Well, that physical body is itself a group of subjective experiences that I have, usually in Colorado or maybe Las Vegas. And so I'm not saying that Jeremy's body doesn't exist. I'm saying that Jeremy's body is a particular flavor of my experience. Now, why do I assume that you are existing in Colorado when I'm not there and that I'm not talking to you? The reason is because I have had thousands of Jeremy experiences, and I have found that the easiest, most practical, day-to-day way of dealing with that particular set of subjective experiences is to assume that it is happening without my presence.
Which I would argue is memory. Because
it's not just memory. No, not really. I mean, memory's involved, but that's also a whole metaphysical. The whole idea that you're existing without me is a metaphysical theory on my part.
Yeah, in your mind.
In my mind, that's right. That doesn't mean that it's bad. That doesn't mean that I should stop. I mean, I do it because that's practical. And if I were to say that you're like a ghost that only exists when I'm on YouTube with you, that'd be a drag for us both. It wouldn't work.
Fuck you, Chris.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So it sounds like then you used to believe that reality was, including your body, was like this external thing, like somehow material or mechanical, and that the self was like this vanishingly small kind of speck in what's basically just material form. And then you change to decide that that all experience is happening in consciousness, not in this supposed reality, quote unquote.
Kinda. I think that there's been what's interesting is that dualists, which are like most Christians are dualists basically, they are in a way they were that stage one where they think there's a physical world, but because they also believe in spirituality, they have to either believe that like spirit things exist in the physical world, which is what a lot of people believe. So they see a ghost and they think of this as like a spirit entity in a physical world.
Yes.
Another way, what I think of as idealism, is saying that, and I am kind of dancing around this sort of, is that the world is just, I guess this is kind of my position. It's hard to describe. It's a metaphysical idea is that there's just raw experience and that things arise in raw experience and then pop out, which is kind of my position. Mine is almost more practical. It's saying that, I always have to remind myself because my position is so close to idealism, but it's different. The idealist would say, if I believe in a physical world, that is wrong. The idea that protons and neutrons are lower level than me and lower level than consciousness is just wrong. My position is that I'm having an experience right now. I'm desperately trying to understand what's going on so that I can organize all this data. Sometimes physicalism is a great way of organizing that data. The theory that there's a physical world in which I live. It's a great theory, and oftentimes it's perfectly appropriate. There are other times, though, when it seems like actually, if you're paying more attention, you realize that the physical world is emerging within my experience, not the other way around. So that explanation has merit as well. Do I think one or the other has 100% accuracy? No. The one thing I'm really against isn't so much materialism, it's reductionism.
Except for the fact that everything is arising from within consciousness.
To me, that's just an obvious fact. If you think of it as a metaphysical
a reductive fact, but an obvious one.
Well, what? That things are arising in consciousness? Well, you think it's obvious, but some people have never even noticed their own mind.
Well, no, I was teasing you because you said you're anti-reductionism, yet that's essentially a reductionist perspective.
Well, that's a problem, is your beliefs are your beliefs, you know?
Okay, well, that's fine. No, you can have them. I'm not...
Yeah, but do I think that am I anti-materialist? I don't think I'm anti-materialist. I think that for 90% of the time, just thinking normal, thinking that Jeremy exists in Colorado and that Colorado is a pre-existing physical place is the right answer most of the time. The reason is because it is the most practical for living our lives and for dealing with the data that I'm dealing with.
So the fact that all you have is your conscious experience basically allows for anything to exist. You just recognize where it's coming from. You're recognizing where it's coming from as it enters your awareness. It's coming from your consciousness into your awareness, or maybe it's the same thing. But it doesn't matter.
But what that means is that any notion that it's coming from someplace else is a perfectly fine theory, but it's a theory. That's my point.
I see. So
you can believe in the physical world just like you can believe in other worlds, just like you can believe in God, just like you can believe in the Big Bang. But don't tell me you know it's right, because you don't. It's a theory.
Yes, because all you have is... I see. So then I'm always the one to take it one step further and say, well, to me, what's implied in everything arises in consciousness, and I do work on this. In fact, it's a backbone of my developing work. If everything is coming from consciousness, then to me, I find it. I find these areas of my own mind that actually don't believe that. And I try to get them to believe the same thing.
I hear that. Yeah, I think that's important. You tell yourself you believe one thing, but in reality, there's obviously other parts of your mind that don't believe it. Sometimes it's frustrating.
The thing is, no matter what you do, you could always say, "Oh, but this is just my experience," and you can believe that. But Well, now I'm having a hard time locating where I would go with that. Because
I tell you what, I want to go pee, and I think we've talked about metaphysics and epistemology a lot. We still haven't talked about Adderall, which is actually in the title of our show.
Yeah, that's probably why I'm talking so much. No, I do that anyway.
You do that I've talked more this time. I'm getting better. I'm trying to. Boy, these are our experience of these shows is so different because you're like just doing what you do, and you love it. You love getting high and walking and talking to me. I, on the other hand, in like work, like I'm playing etudes.
No, you're juggling a lot.
Yeah, but a lot of it, part of that, what I realized early on is that I have to be better about being present with you while I'm doing that. If that means I only play in C, sometimes I only play in C or some shit, because if I play in F sharp, I'm not as aware of you or as aware of Hayes.
Well, let me make this final statement because I don't need to hash it all out. Where I go, if somebody says, if you're saying everything arises in consciousness, that's my philosophical standpoint. It's hard to argue with or against because it's so subjective, and I can understand. But then, okay, then what I get to is whatever we're doing in our life, our attention is focused somewhere. And if your attention is focused out there, whatever that means, if your attention is focused out there, you might be able to tell yourself, this is just my experience, but you're not focusing where your experience is arising, which is in your consciousness, like you do in meditation. Your awareness is focused more closely to that locus, to that center, that point where it's actually happened.
Okay.
Right? You're focused on your consciousness versus being focused on the material world. And so my challenge is, if you really believe that experience is happening in your consciousness, can you somehow experience your consciousness being impacted by the world as opposed to being focused on the world itself? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and we're still not on the same page. I need to go pee.
All right. I'll never resolve this. But thanks to anyone who's endured our 45 minutes of metaphysics. I think it's interesting, but you have to get to a change of perspective. You can't get to it can't be ideas. You can't be talking about something. The words themselves have to create an experience. And I think when you do that, you can find a zone that's more true. And I think that's what mysticism is. We arrive at this zone where it's obvious that something non-ordinary exists because you're experiencing it, as opposed to talking about it from a theoretical level. I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to get to. And how to respond to comments, but I can't see them.
I forgot about my microphone there for a second. I figured out why you can't hear my music. I didn't set it that way in Zoom.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, and actually, if you like it that way, or what I can do is I can leave it to where you don't hear it or don't hear it very much in Zoom, and then if I want to do a musical example like I did today, I can just turn it on.
Oh, yeah. I do like your playing and your patches, but I'm so focused on the dialogue that it can get distracting just because it's stimulus I'm trying to ignore.
Yeah, I understand. And you've got a lot of stimulus you're trying to ignore. So tell me how your Adderall experiment is. What's the story with that?
We're moving on, I promise. I was going to say one last thing, and we could talk about it later.
Okay, but you get 1 minute.
That's it. So I need less than that. I think ultimately what I'm driving at is, can you follow what we're talking about toward an authentic mystical experience? Like, what's the direction towards that? That's it. Because to me, you're talking about something, or it's really actually real because you're experiencing for real. So we'll talk about that next time. You know, something you did say that referred to our topic before of worlds and are they real? Because we never really went in there. You said a lot of people believe that something's real versus it's a theory in your mind, essentially. And
that doesn't sound like me.
You can restate what you said. You said,
how about I not interrupt you, and I'll just let you talk, because I'm not sure what point you're trying to make.
Oh, well, I was going to say that somebody who experiences an actual reality when they take psychedelics, it really versus somebody who's experiencing basically the intentional disorganization of their mind, but it's not, it's not a reality. Those seem to be two possibilities for people on psychedelics. And it sounded like an analogy to what you were saying, that, it's an adequate theory to say you believe in something because it's a useful theory. But if you're a dualist, you really believe that spirit lives in the world and the world's really real, versus everything being kind of like a version of itself. That's my way of saying it. So to me, that was just an analogy for, if you're a dualist, maybe your brain's like, there has to be a reality, and so I'm going to make one. And it looks like this alternate world. Or if you're, an idealist, or whatever version you're calling yourself, non-reductive idealism, then maybe your brain works in a way where it doesn't create realities because you don't believe that they exist so objectively.
That's interesting.
I was trying to think of a reason, because I just read this whole book by Graham Hancock, Supernatural, which I recommend. It's great. And it really got me thinking about some shit that was right there all the time. I just never put it together. And he makes, all he does is present research that already exists. He's not making crazy connections. But it pretty strongly points to the fact that there is another reality of aliens that are really fucking talking to us and have been for millennia. And again, this isn't his point, but this is kind of what his research points to. The contacts with aliens on DMT, other psychedelics, the alien abductions, the spirits that we were relating to when we were cavemen, some of this notion that DNA is so complex it had to come from somewhere else. Conspiracy theorists or whoever, these say that the lizard people grew us and blah, blah, blah. But again, I don't know what these theories refer to really, but the theories themselves are starting to be more appealing to me. So I'm like, you know what?
Really?
That's a better way of explaining it. I just can't say that they're lizard people or that it happened intentionally. But I don't know. Maybe somehow DNA did develop. Francis Crick, the discoverer of DNA?
Yeah.
He wrote a book. His book was, this shit didn't come here. This shit didn't grow on Earth. It came from space. He wrote a book about that.
Really? I didn't know that. I know he comes up a lot, like in, I forget, I'd have to look it up again, but he comes up a lot in like consciousness study circles. He's kind of like one of those guys.
He wrote a couple books. He wrote a book, Diseases from Space. He's just like, this shit's too, I don't know, as really his thesis, but too complex, I guess, to have developed through natural selection. It carries.
You've come back full circle. Remember at the very beginning we were going to talk about intelligent design.
Yeah, I was doing that intentionally.
You know, my thing with intelligent design, actually, I just remembered my thing with intelligent design because I haven't thought about it in a long time. It's not so much necessarily that I believe in intelligent design. That's not the point I want to make. Of course, the point, what would my position be? Of course, my position is it's a reasonable theory and it's useful sometimes. That's all I say about every theory.
Yeah. It's arising in my consciousness.
But the main thing, this is when I was studying theology, Christian theology at a liberal religious school. And everybody there, I mean, kind of the archetype of the usual student was somebody who's sort of a moderate Democrat, but who thinks of themselves as radical because their whole lives they've been around conservative Christians. They hate conservative Christians. And they hate intelligent design because conservative Christians believe in intelligent design. And therefore they hate intelligent design. But if you actually asked your usual liberal left-leaning Christian what they believe, they'd say, well, I believe in evolution, I believe in the Big Bang, and I believe in causation and physics, but God made it happen. Well, that sounds an awful lot like intelligent design to me. That's my point.
I would argue that, yeah, you're right, but you don't know what the word God refers to, therefore you don't know what God made it happen means, really. You don't know what that word refers to. Your theory is correct, but your referent doesn't exist in your awareness.
Oh, you mean that's the problem with... Wait, who are you criticizing? The usual dualistic Christian?
I'm kind of, in a way, I'm criticizing a lot of what we think we know. But, yeah, I'm pointing out that it's the same thing. A Christian, a fundamentalist Christian says, God's a white guy in the sky. Okay, I don't know if anyone really says that, but just for argument's sake. And an atheist says, I'm an atheist because I don't believe that God's a white guy in the sky. And you're like, yeah, you guys, you're not really, you're both saying nothing. And no one's really saying anything. Christian says, I believe in God. And the atheist says, I don't believe in God because God's not a white guy in the sky. But if you take away the referent of white guy in the sky, and you replace it with something else, panpsychism or mysticism or direct experience, God willing, or I don't know, then you say, then you can be agnostic, or you can be, a non-materialist Christian. I'm arguing for the value of challenging the referent. That's what I'm arguing for. Are you responding? Is anyone saying anything interesting that I want to hear?
Well, I wouldn't worry about it. Okay. I'm already kind of over. We mentioned a couple of things. I forget what. Nobody said much in a while. Hayes suggested that God is definitely a white straight male, probably with a white beard.
Yeah. Definitely.
But he's an atheist.
God's an atheist, yeah. He's like, I'm God, nothing else exists. Well, that's what humans think sometimes.
Yeah.
I just think it's an interesting idea that should inspire you. That's what I think. To say that the theory and the referent aren't the same thing. You could say, I believe God did it, but that doesn't mean anything. It only means what you think the word God means.
I totally agree with you. Actually, I have gone on record saying I think that like philosophers or whatever, certainly atheists, they spend way too much time thinking about whether God exists or not, but actually that's only a binary question. There's not even very much information there.
It's a terrible
yes or no.
question.
Yeah, what is God is a far more interesting
Yeah. Which I would argue is kind of the same thing.
I think that's what you were just saying.
I was definitely saying that. And I'm bringing all our topics together. All our topics are basically, there's duality, there's not. I don't think you're a dualist by any stretch of the imagination. I was just trying to find out if you're saying that consciousness is all I have, then it seems to create a duality. If, we're racing to work and we're stressed out, then, so I was arguing that, and I'll go topic by topic. If you say that God exists or not, and you don't know what the word God means, then you clearly aren't any closer to having a real experience of God, whatever that means. Both the atheist and the theist are in the same exact place. Nobody's having a real experience. And if you're saying, I believe everything is originating in consciousness, and at some point that has to come to turn into a mystical experience of oneness, because that's what's implied, at least in one direction. And I would say that you can enjoy the fact that you're having an experience of the Salvia Goddess or these other worlds, but at the same time, you have to know that that is also an expression of your own mind.
Yeah.
As real as it seems.
But that doesn't take anything away from it.
No, right. It doesn't at all. Now we have three things. A, whatever you believe is great for you. Pro or con. Whatever your experience, but there's a lower level thing. And the lower level is always the direct experience of some kind of non-ego state. That's when you have the cred to say, that's when somebody doesn't say, I believe in God. They say, I had a God experience. It's really different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before we get done, I want to hear about Adderall, though.
Okay. So my apologies to anyone who is always waiting for Chris and I to be like, I ate like a kilogram and it was crazy and I was up for 4 weeks hallucinating. I told you on my Salvia trip, that was pretty close, but we're just not partying hard enough. We're too scientific about it all, or mystical or something. Anyway, so like all drugs, I started off small. I took 15 milligrams. Somebody said it's Adderall extended release. So it lasts longer. Maybe it peaks a little more gently. I would assume so. Somebody on Arrowwood said 30 milligrams is a pretty good dose to feel it. But one capsule was 15. So I took one. And I will say it's subtle but noticeable. It feels, I've been trying out different stimulants for a long time. And they all do a slightly different thing. I even took straight dopamine for a while, and still do once in a while. And Adderall, it feels like energy, but focused energy. I can feel that there's like a potential of kind of a buzziness, but I didn't take enough to feel that. But it's really functional. And I could see why people get hooked on this stuff, because it's like really useful and kind of just works. It's like MDMA. It's like more of yourself is what it feels like.
That's interesting. More of yourself.
I mean, I feel like I'm just me, but better.
I'm me, but better.
Yeah.
Well, I can see why that would be addicting, frankly.
Yeah.
You feel like MDMA has that quality?
Oh, yeah, because it's your own serotonin. It's not a mimicry. True. Yeah. And that's why dopamine drugs are addictive, because it's really your dopamine. It's not mimicking dopamine. And opiates, because it's really, well, I guess in that case, it's a chemical that stimulates the receptor like serotonin does. So I don't know. I can't say the analogy fits everything, but if you're releasing your own chemicals, it really feels like that. You're like, this is me, but better. It's,
yeah, totally.
You know, if I was a perfect person and always energetic and smart and, you know, kind and fun, then that would be like me, but better.
Man, sounds like I could like Adderall, honestly.
Well, yeah, we can talk about that. So, you know, I might have another trip report in a week or two. I figure I could probably do 30 milligrams and safely, but I like to start off small because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's my. So yeah, it's almost. If you take a lot of amphetamine, obviously you're going to get high, euphoric, and at some point trip out. But the therapeutic index is really low. So
what does that mean?
So there's this great equation. I actually texted you, but I really just makes everything make a lot of sense. So the equation is the effective dose ED divided by LD equals TI. And that's effective dose divided by lethal dose equals therapeutic index.
Huh.
So the say the effective dose of mushrooms is 1 gram, let's just say.
Sure.
And the lethal dose of mushrooms, let's say, is
infinite.
1 kilogram.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we need a number, right?
Okay.
So now we have whatever, 0.000 whatever is our therapeutic index. It's very low. It's very safe. It's always ED 50. So it's 50% of subjects die or 50% of subjects have an effect. But you have something like heroin, where the effective dose, I don't know, I'm making this up now because I don't know dosages for heroin. But let's say the effective dose is 20 milligrams and the lethal dose is 500 milligrams. Well, that's a much closer threshold, right? If you accidentally overdose on mushrooms, nothing's gonna fucking happen. If you accidentally overdose on heroin, you could very well die. Right. And so the therapeutic index is much higher. And that's in that case, let's say it was 20 milligrams and 500 milligrams. That's like what, 0.01 versus 0.001. So it's like 100 times less safe than mushrooms. So I think I'm getting some of that wrong, but that's the basic idea.
Okay, so basically you're talking about the relationship between making this stuff happen and it having a negative impact on you, like killing you.
Yeah, effective dose versus lethal dose is
gotcha.
Your
but it doesn't
index.
Take into account what the effective dose does, right? Because heroin, the best it can do is help you with your pain, basically, whereas mushrooms might help you become a happier, healthier, better human being. So there's that little detail too.
Yes, right. No, this is purely, in fact, the equation wouldn't apply to the person using the equation is the lab technician, not the person on the drugs. They just give out drugs until 50% of their subjects are dead, and then they just note quantities, and that's it.
Well, that's nice of them.
It could be anything. It could be like, you could just feed. Yeah, you could do anything. So I guess I was saying, for something with a lower therapeutic index, amphetamine is a lower therapeutic index. You take too much, you're going to die. And you take the right amount, it's fine. But I like to start small. So anyway, that's my, I think that's how I got on that. I think
Did you try, what attracted you to trying Adderall?
Let's see, I texted, let me see. Oh yeah, therapeutic. Yeah, it's the lethal dose of 50% of subjects divided by the effective dose. It's the reverse, it's the therapeutic index. So that means for mushrooms, it's really high. Right, a kilogram divided by a gram. And in something else, it's going to be a lot smaller. That makes way more sense because it's just the spectrum between the two. That's all we're looking at.
Right.
I got some because I had a friend who was on Adderall, and I've heard people talk about it, and for all my drug use, I've always been like, I've used big dosages, but only after a lot of experimentation and, inner work. And so I've kind of done it in that way. I had a teacher, so I almost did it academically.
Yeah.
And there were certain drugs that I was like, well, I'm not going to try. It's like kratom. I felt that way for a while. I was like, well, I don't know. That's not my kind of drug. And I thought, well, that's silly. I might as well try it and see what happens. Because at the end of the day, it does matter what the drug is, but you learn how to use it. So even if it's cocaine or alcohol, if you have an intention, and you can still get something out of it. It's just not built for that.
I think that you and I were tripping or something, or hanging out one time, and I came to that conclusion. I haven't really messed around with other drugs very much, like naughty drugs. But it occurred to me, maybe there's a certain point when you're in your late 40s and you've been successfully modulating your own mind pretty safely for 30 years. Maybe there's a point where the rules are a little bit different, and you're allowed to experiment with some other things if you want, because you have proven that you can probably do it pretty safely. If I were to do meth, I'm not attracted to doing meth, but I probably wouldn't be taking 10 times as much. It probably wouldn't be dirty shit, and I probably would know not to do it the next day.
Yes. Each of those are like their own topic, but yes, you basically have to, well, I don't have to do anything, but the path, the masterful poison path is that, if you know how to control each of those variables and your own mind, then yeah, try whatever. So I didn't do it for that perspective. I guess I was just curious because I've never done stimulants. Actually, I have. It's just always been like herbal stimulants and coffee. Drink enough of that, you're gonna get kind of moody. So I can't give you a good reason. I just kind of was curious, and people use it recreationally, and
I could see being curious about Adderall. The problem, it's not a problem. It's just I would probably really like it.
Oh yeah. Well, you're pretty anti-addictive, so like you're saying, if you already know that you're not going to allow yourself to go down a road which seems precarious, then you won't, and you can try it, and then that's it. And that's part of it too, You might do it and be like, God, I really want more. And guess what? Now you have to sit with that experience of wanting more and not having more. And that's part of the whole thing. That's the harsh noise.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, that's just, you're like, well, this is my discomfort. And until, I guess that was my argument, or what I was saying in the beginning. Until you can sit with discomfort and really allow it to be there, then you're going to turn anything into an addiction. Mushrooms, it doesn't matter. Going to the supermarket, I mean, anything's going to make you feel better. And then you're going to keep trying to do that because you don't want to feel worse than you do when you feel better. But learning how to sit with discomfort is like part of self-mastery, because like you said before, it's not it's you. You're in discomfort. Nothing's making you uncomfortable.
Right.
One of my, I always find this humorous, so I always say my favorite, but when someone says, I don't want to do drugs because I don't like being out of control, I have the same response that you had when someone's like, I don't believe in intelligent design, I believe in evolution. It's just God made it happen. You're like, well, where do I start with this one? You're afraid of being in control, you should take drugs to learn that you're not anyway and to be okay with that. Like, that's very counterintuitive.
Yeah. It is almost 3:30 and I should probably go.
Oh, okay. Well, that being said, we're not telling anybody to take drugs for any reason. But,
yeah, we could definitely get in trouble for it. It's a good thing we don't have much audience because we could get in trouble. I hear that Colorado just made a law that you're not allowed to say good things about drugs. Did you hear about that?
No, what does that mean?
Well, I mean, you'd have to look it up, but that is
Well,
the
you
rumor.
told me that. We were talking about that in Oregon, too. Like, you can sell it, you can grow it, but you can't talk about it, let alone say anything good.
Well, there's a law, I don't know the details, but there's a law, pending law in Colorado that has something to do with what you're allowed to say on social media.
Oh, yes,
it's pretty fucked up.
You can't show the Marlboro man smoking a salvia cigarette and be like, it makes me better.
Well, you know, to say that you're not allowed to advertise those things is one thing, but when you start saying that independent citizens who aren't being paid by anybody aren't allowed to say that they like to smoke, man, that is fucked up.
Well, that's what, Second Amendment? It's freedom of speech. I mean, that's just basic shit.
Yeah.
And whatever, fucking, they got everyone addicted to opiates and benzos and alcohol and nicotine. Whatever, we don't need to start in on that, but obviously this is not an ethical choice or even this is a double standard, but anyway.
Oh, I see what you mean. You mean the government got everybody on that shit.
Yeah, when the beer commercial shows one buff dude surrounded by a bunch of chicks on bikinis, like on a speedboat, what do you think that's to say? This stuff sucks, don't do it. Yeah. But nobody wants to see someone high in salvia rolling on the ground. That's not good advertisement. So, whatever. All right. Well, that was fun. Good talking to everybody.
Yep, we better go. We will see y'all later. It was great to chat with you a little bit, Hayes. And everybody else who showed up. And we will probably be around next Friday. Bye-bye.